Y'all, Dawn Richard just exposed Usher for helping Diddy carry out some of the nastiest and shadiest activities, and it is not pretty. Usher and Diddy go way back in the industry, and Diddy helped raise Usher. For a long time, we all thought that Usher was allegedly one of Diddy's victims, and people have felt bad for him. But according to Dawn, Usher is not as innocent as we thought, because he was allegedly right there with Diddy when Diddy was doing this thing with Cassie and roughing her up. Y'all, Dawn came out to spill, and she did not hold back. So what exactly did Usher do to Cassie? And did he really refuse to help Cassie? Let's talk about it. If you're wondering why people have viewed Usher as Diddy's victim, it's because there have been many speculations that Diddy allegedly did some bad things to Usher when Usher lived with Diddy. Back in the 80s and 90s, it was pretty common for young and upcoming artists to be sent to live with older artists who already knew how the business worked. Usher was discovered and signed to LA Reid as a child, and when he turned 13, Reid decided to send him to live with Diddy. Knowing what we know about Diddy, I think y'all can imagine what could have gone down between Usher and Diddy. People who know Diddy have painted him as the type of guy who doesn't really take no for an answer, so Usher was swimming in dangerous waters. Diddy's house at the time was referred to as Puffy Flavor Camp, which should have raised red flags, because what kind of name is that? Anywho, fans have speculated that Usher was traumatized by what he saw at Diddy's house, and that's why he rarely speaks about it. In one interview, he was asked to speak about Diddy and his experience living with Diddy, but the interviewer noted that he was super uncomfortable when the topic shifted to what it was like for him living with Diddy. The interviewer noted that Usher became surprisingly restrained. "I want to save some stuff for my book one day," he said. "I'll put it this way, there was a lot of SEX." This rubbed people the wrong way, and there were questions about who a 13-year-old boy was having intercourse with under Diddy's roof. From what we know, Diddy didn't exactly have teenagers running through his house at the time, so who exactly was Usher with? Don't even get me started on what he said in his interview with Howard Stern.
The place was like just filled with chicks and orgying like nonstop, right?
No, not really. I mean, but hey, it was curious. I got a chance to see some things.
Yeah, but you were 13. What were you seeing?
I went there to see the lifestyle.
Right.
And I saw it. And it was but I don't know if I could indulge and understand what I was even looking at. It was pretty wild. It says that there were very curious things taking place. And I didn't necessarily understand.
Diddy also slipped up and hinted that some shady things happened between him and Usher, like when he claimed that he and Usher used to sleep in the same bed.
That's my brother right here from day one. We used to wake up back in the days when he was like 10 and I was a little bit older, his older brother. We used to fight over the...
Or the time he said this.
You ain't for nobody else but you. You take your turn, boy. I see you. Like, you're doing Vegas. You were in the kitchen eating all my cereal.
So yeah, there are a lot of reasons for people to think that Usher is a victim. Well, Dawn Richard is now claiming that Usher isn't exactly the innocent person we think he is, because he allegedly stands by and watches while Diddy acts out. Dawn filed a lawsuit against Diddy a couple of days ago where she pretty much backed up Cassie's lawsuit, adding some more stories of what Diddy really is like behind the scenes and how he allegedly treated the ladies of Danity Kane. Interestingly, Dawn's lawsuit is not the first time we're hearing about how Diddy mistreated Danity Kane, because his former bodyguard, Gene Deal, once spilled the tea about the time he heard Diddy making plans to allegedly pimp out the ladies of Danity Kane.
And I'm giving you this, Aubrey. He stood up there and he said in front of a lot of people, we were in the studio, and I said something to him and walked out the studio. He said, "Yo, I'm gonna their ass off and pick them up and pimp them out to my He said, I'm gonna them out. I'm gonna get them all on and I'm gonna pimp their ass out to my... And I was like, there's somebody kids. And walked out.
With multiple people coming forward to say the same thing about Diddy, you gotta wonder if the situation isn't way worse than what they're saying. Dawn is the 7th woman and 8th person overall to sue Diddy for inappropriate behavior, and at this point, Diddy better have his lawyers on speed dial, because it doesn't look like the lawyers are stopping anytime soon. Dawn revealed that Diddy subjected the group to torture-like conditions, including forcing them to rehearse for extended periods of time without rest. In the lawsuit, she said, throughout the productions of Making the Band 3 and 4, Mr. Combs deprived Miss Richard and her Danity Kane bandmates of basic needs, such as adequate food and sleep. When Miss Richard or her Danity Kane bandmates requested meals or rest, Mr. Combs refused and chastised them with derogatory comments like, "You bees don't want this," or "Y'all are not hungry enough, and I'm paying you bees to work." It continued. Upon information and belief, Mr. Combs would regularly be awake for prolonged periods of time because he was high on drugs. During these periods, Mr. Combs demanded continuous access to Miss Richard and her her Danity Kane bandmates, often forcing them to record and rehearse for stretches of 36 to 48 hours without breaks. She also claimed that he would use demeaning words on her in front of his bodyguards. Between approximately 2009 and 2011, throughout Diddy Dirty Money's recording process, rehearsals, performances, Mr. Combs repeatedly ordered Miss Richard to strip down to her underwear. He frequently referred to her as a B or and made demeaning remarks about her body, alternatingly calling her lazy, fat, ugly, and skinny, particularly in front of his friends, producers, and bodyguards. Dawn also backed up Lil Rod's claims about how Diddy had some young girls partying in the studio using some not-so-legal substances. Often while they were recording in the studio, Mr. Combs will hold parties where he would invite young men and women who were often scantily dressed and appeared underage to use and engage in acts. Miss Richard observed Mr. Combs and his colleagues kissing and inappropriately touching the young women. Upon information and belief, the participants often left the immediate area to have intercourse and returned shortly thereafter. When she tried to once speak up and stand up for herself, Diddy punished her by locking her out in the dead of winter. She wrote, "Miss Richard screamed as loudly as she could, but no one responded. It was late evening in the winter time, the windows were heavily tinted, and the interior of the car was dark except for faint interior lights. Miss Richard's belongings and winter coat were in the studio while the ignition was off and there was no heat." With Mr. Combs' prior threats running through her mind, Mr. Richard felt sheer panic, terror, and feelings of claustrophobia at being locked in a small, dark, enclosed space with no way to communicate or call for help. She began to feel cold and feared for her life, not knowing when or if she would be released. Child, the Danity Kane girls were going through it, and it was like they were living in a state of constant terror. Now, if you're wondering what Usher has to do with all this, Dawn claimed that she once saw Diddy put paws on Cassie right in front of Usher, but he did nothing and pretended like he didn't see anything. The court document said, Combs hosted a dinner at a West Hollywood, California restaurant, which Miss Richard and Miss Harper were required to attend. Among the guests at the dinner were celebrities like Neo and Usher, as well as Mr. Levine. At the dinner, Mr. Combs and Miss Ventura had an argument. In front of the dinner guests, Mr. Combs hissed at Miss Ventura in a screaming whisper and forcefully her in the stomach, causing her to double over in visible pain, crying. Miss Clark escorted Miss Ventura out of the restaurant, and Mr. Combs remained and continued socializing with the dinner guests. This backs up Cassie's claim that several people in the industry knew that Diddy was putting paws on her and did nothing to help her. But the fact that Usher, of all people, knew what was going on but didn't help her or even try to stop Diddy is wild. He has this image of being a good guy who respects women, but he turned a blind eye to Diddy's actions and just continued eating after he saw Cassie get brutalized like that in public. Child, is Usher just as bad as Diddy? Because if he was willing to overlook that, what else did he overlook in private? Fans were blown away by this revelation, and they commented, "I like how the internet is ignoring the fact that Usher was name dropped in the Diddy lawsuit. Him and Neo sat right there and ate their food while Diddy beat the ish out of Cassie. Crazy." So allegedly, Diddy punched Cassie in her stomach at a dinner in front of Neo, Usher, and Jimmy Levine, and they just kept eating. And the only one that disappoints me out of this is Usher. I don't know why, but I expected him of all people to say something to this MFer. Maybe he's scared of Diddy too, I don't know. Poor Cassie, man. Y'all drop your thoughts about this in the comments, then check out this next video.